Welcome back to Drunk on Writing. I just got back from seeing First Man, and, well, not just. I saw a 7 o'clock movie, and it's now 10:33. I spent a little bit time pondering the movie, because I left that movie in sheer awe. It is just a powerhouse of a film, but we'll get to that in a second. First, I want to say welcome to Drunk on Writing. Second, I want to say this episode is brought to you by Ariya Norinth. You too can become a patron over at patreon.com/drunkonwriting if you choose to. And third, I'm drinking this surprisingly appropriate beer that we're going to get to in a bit. Oh, that's good. So, first thoughts on First Man. Now, I'm going to keep it spoiler-free, though you might say a movie inspired by a true story might not need a spoiler warning. I'm going to give it a spoiler treatment anyway. I think it warrants it. But first, I want to say, this movie, it's got Oscar contender written all over it. It is simply amazing. The cinematography, the direction, the sound design among everything is superb. But you know what? Before I get too far into it, before I talk specifics, maybe I should give a little bit of background on First Man, shall we? First Man was directed by Damien Chazelle, who you might know from La La Land, and stars Ryan Gosling, who you also might know from La La Land, as Neil Armstrong. And yes, my profound love for La La Land, my love that was so deep that it became one of the first topics I discussed on Drunk on Writing, is definitely, absolutely the main reason I wanted to go see this. Although I do have a sick sort of fascination with the moon, the same kind of fascination that would drive people to become astronauts in the first place. The movie is based on the official biography, First Man, The Life of Neil A. Armstrong, by James R. Henson, which was first published in 2005 by Simon & Schuster and leads up to the Apollo 11 mission and sort of its aftermath, which, is, of course, when Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon. Supposedly. I believe it. I think it happened. But for all you Kubrick fans out there, all you conspiracy theorists, just want to throw this little bit in for you to make you feel welcome and warm at home. The film debuted at the Venice Film Festival on August 29th and screened at the Telluride Film Festival August 31st and the Toronto International Film Festival September 9th. I went to the very first public showing tonight. It was a 7 o'clock IMAX showing, which I highly recommend you see this in IMAX, but we'll get to that more in a little bit. And while I went in not reading a single review, I did check the Rotten Tomatoes score earlier in the week. At that time, First Man had an 88% based on 86 reviews, with the critical consensus being this: First Man uses a personal focus to fuel a look back at a pivotal moment in human history and takes audiences on a soaring, dramatic journey along the way. Now, I tried to take some notes on my phone as the movie was rolling. I had it kind of tucked between my legs, tapping away at it. I was trying to keep, the 10 people or so behind me from seeing the camera. I think I did a pretty good job. I mostly crossed my legs and tried to hide it. But the notes don't really help me now because it's pretty much gibberish. I have big thumbs that kind of get in the way with these tiny little keyboards. But my main focus in these notes was the cinematography, the use of smash zooms, the use of shaky cams to kind of give us a sense of being there. This whole movie was shot in almost home movie fashion. It was almost documentary fashion in a lot of ways. It made it feel like we were back in the mid to late 60s, watching these events unfold. And what helped it was a certain graininess to the film quality. It very much felt like we were back there. And the colors were a bit washed out too. There was almost a sepia tone to it, but not quite that far, but definitely there's a little bit of a wash to them. Pair that with the sound design. Damien Chazelle became probably most famous for La La Land, which was all about the sound design, the use of music. This movie utilizes music to great effect. And while I primarily want to give it to the drums, there's this constant hammering drum beat that is a heartbeat that is just skyrocketing. It made my heartbeat skyrocket, especially with the IMAX speakers. I was just tense this entire movie, which is, again, quite a feat, given we know how it ends, right? We know what happens. Spoilers, he lands on the moon, he walks on the moon, he's the first man to walk on the moon, and then he gets back. We know that that happens. So, any kind of dramatic movie like this, the tense situations, the suspense here has to be elevated. And this was so elevated primarily by the sound design and the camera work. We get a lot of shaky cams, we get a lot of up-close focuses, we got a lot of looks at Ryan Gosling's eyes, we get a lot of looks out the windows, there's a lot of dramatic pulls and a lot of shifts. At one point we see the Earth, then we pan over and we see the moon. There's a lot of great cinematography effects. And I do want to give a great shout out to Claire Foy, because she is absolutely amazing in this movie. Ryan Gosling, he's got the star billing, but he's a very stoic kind of character, which, plays into Neil Armstrong as a person. That's who he was. But Claire Foy, being the wife of this astronaut, as all these events are unfolding, every moment she's on the screen, you just feel for her. Your heart just breaks for her. And I gotta say, there were some gut-wrenching, emotional scenes in this movie. I ended up crying, and maybe it's because I'm a father, but it was certainly a tearjerker. And bottom line, you need to see this movie. This movie was great from beginning to end. Despite knowing exactly how it was going to end, I was surprised. There were surprising moments. There were moments I was sitting there like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen here. But then it doesn't, and it just keeps going. The scene keeps running, and I'm like, when's it going to happen? What's happening here? Oh my God, this is so stressful. And this happened multiple times through this movie. I was sitting there just like, holy crap. I can't believe that happened. I can't wait for award season, because I think this is going to be the one that is sweeping everything. Oh my God, go see this movie. Do not flake on this one, and see it in IMAX. The speakers will not disappoint. Now, before we get to the spoiler section, again, funny spoiler section, I want to talk about this beer I'm drinking. It's called Ryan and the Gosling. Now, they have this fun little description on their website of this beer I want to share with you. And it starts, "Hey girl, just listening to you talk about how the 100% Brettanomyces with CMY1, CMY5, CMY7, along with a mash consisting of pale 2-row, Munich 2, oats, wheat, and honey, together with citrus peel and juice that is added at KO, followed by fresh zest with balanced citrusy hop characteristics at Whirlpool, makes me want to drink this beer just for you." I have no idea what half of that means. I don't know if I said half of it right. What is that? Brettanomyces? Brettanomics? I don't know what that is. But this beer is quite good. You can see it's very, very pale. It's got a nice bright poppy color to it. The flavor is so forward. There's a lot of maltiness to this, a lot of kind of fruit to this. It's good. And I don't know, this might have been a limited edition. It might not be on shelves anymore. I got this summer last year or so, and like I said, it's been chilling in my fridge. But if you have a chance to pick this up, I'd suggest you do. On a hot day like the one today that I'm filming, and it seems like this hotness is never going to end, despite all this rain that we're getting, this is a damn fine beer. So let's jump into some spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to come back, that's fine. Bookmark it. Come right back here. I'm going to put the little spoilers tag over here in the corner. Now, you might be wondering, what am I going to spoil about historical events? Well, there's a lot of stuff that happened here that either I wasn't entirely clear on, or I just was not expecting to happen the way that they did. So, the movie opens up with Ryan Gosling and this little girl who you come to realize is Neil Armstrong's daughter, and she has a tumor. And within the first 5-10 minutes, she dies. And they're at a funeral, and at this point, he's not an astronaut, he is an engineer with flight experience. He was working on the airplanes. And he goes in, he submits his hat for this NASA program as something of a fresh start to kind of get away to rebuild their life after the death of their daughter. And from there, it's just, there's this wall built up between him and everyone else. There's a stoicness to him. He walls himself off, and he's kind of isolated. And what this performance does, what this movie does in particular, is kind of demonstrate that Neil Armstrong, the national hero that he is, I mean, he stepped on the friggin' moon. He was an everyman. He was one of us. He was just as damaged as everyone else. He was just as fragile as everyone else. And despite his strengths, he has unbelievable strengths. He went to the moon. He did these things that so few people have managed to do. And it's terrifying. And meanwhile, so many people around him are dying. His neighbor, who he's really good friends with throughout the movie, he's one of the 3 astronauts on Apollo 1. And the Apollo 1 scene is one of the scenes that I was sitting there gripping my seat about, because I knew what was going to happen. My wife was a little fuzzy on it. She wasn't entirely sure. But I'm waiting for the explosion to happen. And I kept comparing it to Apollo 13, a great movie, Apollo 13, starring Tom Hanks. And in that scene, in that movie, Apollo 1 is kind of glossed over very quickly. It's a very quick kind of moment, but it's horrific at the same time. This movie, you are in the cockpit with the astronauts, and you see the sparks. And, they're sitting there for a while, and they're like getting sweaty, they're tired, they're like, when's this going to end? And they're suddenly like, somebody speaks in their ear, we got a malfunction here, and then they look over and there's this spark, and I'm like, what is that? And then the fire happens, and there's just like, fire, and the guy's he's got this complicated looking key thing to try to open the hatch to get out, and it's just, and that's it, and they're engulfed in flames, and the hatch basically explodes out, and it's horrifying. And I did not expect to be horrified by this movie. There's a lot of terrifying moments. When they first peek over onto the moon, when the sun comes up behind the moon and they're looking down on this alien environment, it's beautiful, but horrifying at the same time. It's like stepping into this different nightmare world. You don't know what to expect. They land, and Neil Armstrong is looking down, Ryan Gosling is looking down on the powdery surface, and he's like, the lunar lander has sunk in a couple of inches. What's going to happen when I step out there? And it was all these tiny little moments that made me realize, I was never there. I wasn't there. I didn't see all these personal moments. I see what is on TV. I see what was in the history books. I heard his line, that famous line. No, I'm not going to repeat it here. I saw the flag going up. And, while I touched upon this, we should talk about the flag, because it became kind of a big deal in case you didn't realize it. So back in August, it got revealed shortly after the first screening that the scene of them planting the American flag was not included in the movie. People got all up in arms. Marco Rubio got in on it. Donald Trump weighed in on it. Even Buzz Aldrin, responded to it. Damien Chazelle, the director of the movie, he ended up coming out and putting out a statement. He said stuff in an interview. And I really liked the way he handled it. This is what he said in an interview with the LA Times. It surprised me because there are so many things that we weren't able to focus on, not only during the lunar EVA, but in the entirety of Apollo 11. Just by the nature of the story we were telling, we just couldn't go into every detail. So our through line became, especially at this part of the movie where it's the final emotional journey for Neil, what were the private, unknown moments of Neil on the moon? The flag was not a private, unknown moment for Neil. It's a very famous moment, and it wasn't Neil alone. We included the famous descent down the ladder because that's him alone. Literally, first feeling what it's like to be on the moon. But other than that, we only wanted to focus on the unfamous stuff on the moon. So we don't go into the phone call with Nixon. We don't go into the scientific experiments. We don't go into re-entry. He says much the same in the statement that he put out, but there is one sentence that really kind of stands out to me. My goal with this movie was to share with audiences the unseen, unknown aspects of America's mission to the moon. And before, I give my thoughts on it, I do want to say Neil Armstrong's sons, Mark and Rick, they weighed in on this too. They said, this story is human and it is universal. Of course, it celebrates an American achievement. It also celebrates an achievement for all mankind. As it says on the plaque Neil and Buzz left on the moon. It is a story about an ordinary man who makes profound sacrifices and suffers through intense loss in order to achieve the impossible. In short, we do not feel this movie is anti-American in the slightest. Quite the opposite. But don't take our word for it. We'd encourage everyone to go see this remarkable film and see it for themselves. I don't think a truer statement could be said. This movie is not this bang the drum, woo woo America kind of movie. That I think Apollo 13 was kind of that. I think what was that HBO series from Earth to the Moon? From Earth to the Moon? I don't know. It was a great series. Haven't watched it in a while. Very much, this kind of propaganda piece, and that's really what the space mission was at the time. It was this, USSR is going to the moon, trying to go to the moon. We have to try to go to the moon. We have to beat them. They're trying to beat us. And it was this kind of big cluster, right? There's this great line by Claire Foy's character in the movie where she says, you're a bunch of boys putting together, clay models or something like that and trying to get men into outer space. I don't know. It was a great line. I'm not doing it justice. Fantastic line. I guess I would be remiss to not talk about the bracelet, because the bracelet is kind of the climax, right? It's his emotional climax where the movie starts with him losing his daughter and taking that bracelet and at the funeral and holding it and then putting it in the drawer, and then you see he's brought it to the moon. I did not expect that. I was not expecting that. It was farthest from my mind. My wife expected it. She was like, oh, of course that was going to happen. I don't know. Maybe she thinks on a different level than I do. But I started tearing up immediately at that moment. And I was just shocked. And I was right there with Ryan Gosling. And then he comes back and, he's with his wife, but they're separated by glass. And they put their hands together on the opposite sides of the glass. Kind of, this classic kind of Kirk Spock kind of moment. They don't say any words. They just stare at each other. And they're still separated physically. They're physically separated. But I think at that point you could tell that the walls that he had put up had begun to break down. And he was reaching out to her and he was going to be with her again. And it's just so fantastic. There's so many levels to this movie. And maybe at some point I will do a dissection of it, because I think this was an astounding achievement in film. I really have to say, I can't get over the sound design. The fact that I was sitting there, just my heart pumping because of the sound design. And when they go out to the moon, the hatch opens up and you hear the hiss of the oxygen, and it's just silent. And it's just silent for a while as they step out. And all you hear after that point is they're talking through the radio, because that's all you could hear. There was no oxygen. There was no sound. Just so incredibly well done. I am gushing about this, and I'm in sheer awe. So yes, you could tell I came out of this just shattered. I was not expecting anything near as good as this. I want to see it again. I want to see it again. Maybe I'll go see it again soon. Oh, yeah. And so yeah, I'm not gonna keep going with this. I'm not gonna bust your mind trying to explain my love for this. All I want to say at this point is thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Please give it a thumbs up. And if you're really enjoying it, please head on over to patreon.com/drunkonwriting and sign up to support the channel. This month, I'm doing something particularly fun. If we hit the next funding goal by November 1st, we are unlocking a 24-hour stream in which I will review 24 pumpkin and Oktoberfest beers. And also, if that funding carries over into December, all of November's funding will be donated to charity. So kind of a fun deal. I hope you take me up on that. And, until next time, cheers and keep on writing. Oh, and go see First Man.